I think the pandemic has really defined the hero for me. And that is the person who was able to pivot, who, in spite of personal angst, were able to lead their teams and to lead from work from home workforce that had never done that before, and to hide some of their personal fears to be able to lead through this type of change. It took a very special leader to be optimistic and positive.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to The Sourcing Hero. I'm your host, Catherine McCleary. I've got a really special guest here today. So excited to have you on the show, Dawn Tiura of Sourcing Industry Group. Most of you know her as Dawn from SIG. SIG is what I hear most commonly. But Dawn, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here, Catherine.
Glad to have you. And as you just told me, I'm glad to know that you are in Florida and not all of the blizzards currently happening.
That's true. I don't like to rub it in this time of year, so I'm very cautious about mentioning that.
Well, I'm glad that you've got a low of 48 happening today. That's a beautiful temperature I wish I could have. As we're starting the year, I'm thinking about, gosh, we've already made it through January. I feel like January last year was such a battle as well. We're moving into 2021 for real. We've made it. We're into February. Thinking back, because it's been a while since we've connected, tell me about SIG in 2020. What was a big win for you guys?
It started off, it was going to be our biggest and best year ever. December, January, February were on fire. And we were all excited and everything was really positive. And then really into March. And then we became about 6 weeks out from our spring summit. And I had been traveling quite a bit. So I was very COVID aware. And I think a lot of our staff, even though they're throughout the country, North America actually, they kept thinking, well, we're just on a 2-week shutdown. Where schools are just shut for 2 weeks. We'll be back up and running. And so I think I was a little bit more aware, and I kept saying, you guys, we need to have contingency plans. Like, no way, 6 weeks out from now, we'll all be back to normal. So all of our staff had our flights booked. Everyone was ready to go. We were going to be producing our event. And then, as you know, everything came to a screeching stop. So we had, at that point, 5 weeks of time to flip our spring summit into a fully digital summit. And it was, in some ways, I have to be honest with you, Catherine, it was a godsend, because when I normally would have been hyper alert, worried to death, which came later, I was so intense on changing our format and going to a virtual or fully digital event that I didn't have time to worry about anything, because it was, 18-hour days for everybody on the team. And then to convince our sponsors to come along with us, to convince, all of our speakers to come along. And then my challenge to marketing was, we normally get 350 people twice a year at our events. That's our sweet spot. I said, I want 500. And they said, oh my gosh, how are we ever going to do that? Well, we ended up delivering 1,300 or 1,200 for the spring summit.
Well, and that's the beauty of digital events that I think that people discovered last year.
Yeah, is that your reach is so huge. So we had, I think, 17 countries or 24 countries, something outrageous. And, people from all walks of life participating and commenting and everything. So it was so much fun. And then when it was over, it was like, oh my gosh, well, at least by fall, this was great, but by fall we'll be back in person. And then the realization started to set in that no, we're not. In all of our regional events, everything is going to go digital for the foreseeable future. And so that, like everyone else, the word pivot, but I think the difference with SIG, and something I've always told people, is it's okay to get stuck, but it's not okay to stand still. So venture off from your safe spot and take a step this way to the left. And if that doesn't feel good, come back. Then go straight, then go to right, and then go behind you. Just don't stand in one spot. Try things. And that was really the way to try and push people, and said, you're not going to be comfortable. So just keep taking steps until one of them starts to feel comfortable for you, and figure out how you personally can pivot. And so my team was amazing. They didn't want to believe that COVID was going to last. I didn't want to believe it, but we had to plan on it. And obviously it did. And so we went through all of our signature events became digital. All of our CPO meet and eats became CPO executive, regional or roundtables. all digital. Fall Summit went digital. So, and now here we are in February, and we are still looking at digital for at least the first half of this year. So, what a year.
I mean, I remember last year when we were first chatting that Anthony and I were, we were so stoked to come out to one of your events. I believe it was the fall event we were planning on coming to and just checking it out. And we thought for sure the fall would still be staying in place. But alas, here we are. And it sounds like you had some great success with that. So moving into the spring, more digital events. And then let's just pretend fall is going to be normal, air quotes here, normal. How do you feel about back to in-person events versus digital events? Will you be doing a mix of both? What does that look like for SIG?
Yeah. And so, the one thing that our board was really keen on was the fact that when we went digital, so many more of their staff were able to attend, where they can't afford to fly everybody out for a summit. So they have asked that we continue in a hybrid format once we go back to live. So I suspect the senior executives will travel in for the networking and maybe the direct reports for them, and that everyone else will then stream. And so in fact, I just got off an executive team call. So we have to define what our hybrid's going to be. Are we going to stream everything a week later after the summit and have it all canned? Are we going to stream some of it live? If we do stream some of it live, will we take live Q&A from the streaming audience as well as the in-person audience? All of those things have to be determined. So we know our reach is much bigger, but the true networking, capabilities, the digital people will be able to network digitally. The in-person will network in person. It's going to be a hard crossover to get in-person to want to really spend time with a digital person when you have a live person right next to you that you could talk to. So I think we'll probably keep those two networking aspects separate. Digital will network with digital, live will network with live. So we're trying to work through what all that means right now. And so another pivot.
It's a brave new world, I'm telling you. I love going to live events. I think that there's such a great energy to seeing someone on stage, seeing their passion, speaking with all the passion that they have in front of people. But I have to say, people got really creative with digital events in the last year. And I think it takes a lot of skill, a lot of creativity. So are you guys thinking of mixing it up a little bit for the next spring session?
Yeah, so we actually talked about when we get into 2022 is maybe we'll only do one live summit per year, perhaps, and one fully digital, or one that's live with hybrid streaming and one that's fully digital. So we're going to sort of play it by ear as we go through. Obviously a lot of it is going to take into account the vaccination rollout and the corporate release of executives. So while I have a lot of executives who are allowed by company rule to travel for personal business or personal use, they are precluded from traveling for corporate business right now. So it's going to be when they finally say the executives are allowed to travel for corporate business, combined with when they are personally comfortable for traveling for business without a vaccine. And it's funny, people will travel on vacation without a vaccine, but they won't travel on a business event without a vaccine.
I'm not traveling either way without a vaccine. I'm really just afraid of it. So I stay in my house a lot. If you all could see me right now, I am very much in the deepest part of my house. I'm in a closet recording. Well, that's cool. I think that I have an idea of your experience as a sourcing hero and what that means to you. I think that you've said the word pivot a few times, but I want to ask you, as the theme of this show, what does a sourcing hero mean to you?
If you had asked me a year ago, I would have had a different answer. And I would say today, I think the pandemic has really defined the hero for me. And that is the person who was able to pivot, or whatever you want to call it, and the person who realized through all of, sort of the fog that we were all in the beginning, you couldn't see clearly. Nobody had a crystal ball. Nobody could see out beyond a week or two or three ahead of themselves. And yet we had huge supply chain disruption. So I have so many sourcing heroes that I have had the opportunity to spend time with this past year who, in spite of personal angst, were able to lead their teams and to lead from work from home workforce that had never done that before, and to hide some of their personal fears to be able to lead through this type of change. It took a very special leader to be optimistic and positive and let's go. And, it's a whole brave new world versus the person who really internally might just want to shut down and was scared to death on a personal level or for a loved one. And I have seen so many of them just find the strength to be a leader through all of this. And the optimism was we all had to shift. And those who did it well and still continue to lead are doing exemplary work. And they just have people in the organization now recognize sourcing and procurement as being the heroes. Those who didn't, those who got paralyzed and just kept waiting for someone to tell them the answer, like when is it going back to normal? Those folks, I think, will be short lasting in their careers. I think that they have probably just said it's time to retire. So I've seen two different leaders. One leader is like, at least for us, it was like, come on, we can make this work. It's going to be great. And we'll get our members to adapt with us. And the opposite would have been, woe is me. We'll just wait it out. We'll cancel everything and just wait and see. And thank God we didn't do that because it wasn't 2 weeks or 4 weeks. It's now we're over a year. And that wait and see would have killed us. So, we've seen some great leaders out there. People that had to learn things like cotton for Q-tips doesn't mean much to most people unless you are running one of the largest testing companies in the world who have testing sites in 56 countries. And suddenly they need to have Q-tips to be able to do swabs and had to learn, like, can I use bamboo instead of paper wrapped for my sticks? Can I find new sources of cotton for the Q-tips? All the things that they had to relearn, something that you would have said a Q-tip is a consumer item. It's a SKU. It is a commodity. It is not something I'm ever going to engineer or worry about specification. And suddenly they had to re-specify a Q-tip that would work in a testing environment that would pass the CDC and the CDC-like organizations in every country. That's a sourcing hero. All new ways of looking at something as mundane to the normal person pre-COVID of a Q-tip. And those are the people that just said, hey, we need to get creative. And maybe we can use bamboo for our sticks since the paper is in short supply. And we can find other sources of cotton because people aren't manufacturing as many clothing. Those are the fun things. So when you start hearing about people just taking the bull by the horns and saying, I don't know how we're going to do it, but we're going to. Those are my heroes.
I love that. And there are a couple things that I heard in there that I feel are so inspiring. You mentioned right when the pandemic began, there was a fog, right? That is one of the best descriptors of that time where you could only see a week, maybe two, like you said, ahead of you, if that, a day or two, honestly. And that there were people that had the courage to lead through the fog. That's extraordinary, right? To advance forward into the unknown and really have a massive impact on so many people, positive impact.
You're going through a fog bank and you're saying, follow me, and nobody can see where you're going. I mean, that takes extraordinary leadership for people to be able to get their teams through that and to feel enough confidence in my leader that I'm going to follow you. And so that's where I just saw these exemplary leaders out there that made it safe for people to make those journeys with them.
Dawn, do you think that your team would say the same about you?
I hope so. I had one day, I will be absolutely honest with you, Catherine, that I had an absolute breakdown. And I was with my significant other and I just cried. And I said, I have a type 1 diabetic daughter. I have, a son out in school. I have another son in California. My other daughter is an ER nurse. I kept thinking, oh my God, my kids. And I have another son that's going to school in Costa Rica and couldn't come home for the pandemic. The borders were shut. I had one day of just crying and worry. And then for some reason, I needed to get it out. And then I was fine after that. Like, I'm going to take the precautions. I'm going to follow the science. I'm not an idiot. And I'm going to be as safe as I can. And if something happens, it's going to be by the grace of God that, I tried everything I could to avoid it. And I can follow the guidelines. And so we did, but I still have a teenager that comes and goes and sees her friends and they don't all wear masks all the time. And, we've been tested a number of times, but I don't know about you, I have gotten more comfortable with COVID in its entirety. And now that there's a vaccine, I see a road forward. And then you get the variants and they'll scare you again. But yeah, but I did have my one day of breakdown, and I'm not going to lie that it just overwhelmed me suddenly. And I don't know why that one day it hit me.
I mean, spoken like a true leader, right? If you can't admit that there's fear or potential weakness in a really tough situation, that's not somebody that could lead other people through the same thing. So yeah, I get that. And my goodness, to have all of your children in interesting positions. And I'm a mom too. I've got 2 kids and some health compromised parents. And so I've had my moments of worry, but it really was just one moment where I lost it, I think. And it's been a lot of focus on tomorrow. What are we getting done tomorrow?
Yeah, and we're going to get through it. And I wholeheartedly believe we're going to be so much stronger. But I also wholeheartedly believe that we have learned a whole lot around both planning for succession within our own organizations to understanding, if nothing else, everybody now knows they need to know who their third and fourth tier suppliers are. And that's one of the things happened that was just mind-boggling to me is we have been preaching this. Everybody knows who your third party is. That's who I contract with. And we kept saying, who's your fourth party? You need to know your fourth party because there's so much risk. So many third parties all use the same fourth party. So they thought they were diversified because I have multiple contracts. Little did they know that a lot of the raw materials or services came from the same fourth party. And at the end of the day, a lot of, if not most roads led to China. And suddenly, I'm diversified. I'm buying out of North Vietnam and Singapore. And guess what? They're all using the same third party, is all the same company in China. That was mind-boggling for people. And so it really woke people up to the amount of risk they had and the lack of resiliency they had in their supply chain. So that to me was like, not like I told you so, although we've been asking people to have that visibility. So I never say I told you so, but oh my gosh, they're all so interested in that now. Thank goodness.
Right. Well, some good came out of that. And, you don't have to say I told you so because obviously you want to help people.
Right.
Well, what else can you advise on the up and coming procurement and maybe people that are trying to become more flexible, more agile this year? Maybe they weren't last year. Maybe they're trying to keep up. What's your advice for professionals in procurement and sourcing?
So I think that the most important thing we can do now as professionals is to stay curious. You cannot, as much as it'd be nice to shut off the news and not read and just stay in your little bubble, we have to be aware of what's going on around the world. More so now, and I think it's apparent to everybody than before. So I think the 2 natural traits that I look for in people in sourcing is, regardless of your undergrad and your grad degree and all that, is I think you need to have a natural curiosity, and I think you have to have an insatiable need to learn. And if you think you know it all, then I don't want to have anything to do with you because you don't. And if you don't have insatiable curiosity, you're not going to be open to this myriad of learning. And so read at least 2 or 3 newspapers a day, follow publications, find, it was funny. I was talking to John Scully, who was on our board for about 5 years. And his first comment to me was, what do you read? What are you talking about? And he said, what do you read on a daily basis? And I said, I read off my newspapers and I subscribe to The Economist and for a fun, different look at things, Vanity Fair. And I also love The Atlantic, and I follow Twitter for about an hour a day. And he said, Twitter? I said, yeah, I follow about 100 amazingly bright people, and they follow another 100 to 500 themselves. So think about the news sources that are coming into my feed that I would never have even known existed. So when I start looking and starting to see a trend from these really, really bright people, it's an aha moment for me, like, maybe they're onto something. And so I like to use that as one of my predictors on what else is coming. So I liked that part of it. And I think the other silver lining that came out of this is automation. People realized that all that paper pushing and mundane work they were doing isn't necessary and needs to be automated. And so we've seen a lot of people really automating their systems and getting rid of the dumb work that they were doing. And that, I think, is just brilliant.
I love to hear that. I've had so many conversations this year about that, especially with people on this podcast that say that people in procurement need to be focused more on strategic thinking, evolving past the tactical work. Well, that's all good and well. But if the organization that you're with is not investing in any technology that helps encourage automation of any kind, you're in trouble. So
you're in big trouble and you're going to fall behind. Yes. You're the definition of a dinosaur today.
yes, good point about automation. Don, I think that we would love to hear more about your role at SIG. You're president and CEO for how many years now?
Well, I had the pleasure of taking over in November 2007, which meant, and if you're old enough to remember the last recession, it was a crazy ride. So in February of 2008, the market crashed. And so I got to ride out that recession. And so I think in some ways it made me very adept to, there's a potential recession. We need to streamline. We need to be automated. We need to do everything smart. So I think my role is always looking ahead, and it's to make people uncomfortable. And by that, I mean, if you just come to SIG and we say the same old thing and we rest on the same old stories and we pat ourselves in the back for what we did last year, we're going to be outdated in no time at all. So I think our job is to constantly push people forward and make you a little uncomfortable. And when I get people to say, I'm so tired of drinking out that water hose, it's you need to learn to swallow faster because it's going to keep coming. And you can't divert it. You can't make the hole smaller. You can't make the flow any slower. You cannot adjust the speed of change. The only thing you can do is adjust yourself and your capacity to absorb it and accept it. And once you open it up and say, bring it on, you can drink from the largest hose out there and enjoy it. And that's really the place that we have to get strong sourcing people to be comfortable today. Is change is never ending. It's coming at us faster and faster than it's ever come before. So figure out a way that you personally can embrace it and enjoy it.
Right. So procurement, if you were thinking about resting on your laurels of 2020 and all of the success that you had, think again, because Don's here to tell you that there's more coming.
There's more coming. And that's old news already. That was last year. What are you going to do for me this year?
So what is, for those that are not familiar with Sourcing Industry Group, what does SIG do?
So we are the world's largest association focused on people in sourcing, outsourcing, and third-party risk. So like any other membership association, we are about the sense of community, about best practice sharing, but as much is about next practice, is about evolving and staying ahead of where the industry is going. And so I am passionate about education. I've been a lifelong learner. I think everyone needs to be. I think it just makes your life so much more fulfilling. And so we really do push the education certification aspect of it. So we have SIG University, which now certified, I think, 22,000 people in 17 different countries already through the certification. We also offer some of our programs in Latin Spanish as well. So I do see that as evolving. I think we'll be adding more to that as we go. There are certification needs. I think we'll be developing this year our executive leadership program, because I do think it's time for some of the baby boomers to attrite out of the system, and we need to develop new leaders. So I think that's really important. So we're always going to be pushing the education envelope, always finding ways of networking and best practice sharing and how to get through the weeds and get to the really important opportunities that are out there. Looking at all the emerging procurement technologies, I think is so exciting and fun, and I think that's what we'll focus on. So I'm very optimistic about both 2021 and beyond. I think it's going to be exciting. It's going to be fun. And, there'll be another pandemic or there will be something else. The world has gotten so small and we're so interconnected. There's going to be another global event in my lifetime, where this one might have been 100 years in the making. I think we're going to experience more of this in the future, and I think we're going to be more ready for it as a result of it. So I'm very optimistic.
I can hear it in your voice. I can see it in your face. You're very passionate about it, and I can see why you've been leading SIG since 2007, and that is no small feat. That's what you're going on 14 years?
Yeah, but who's counting? It feels like yesterday. I love it every day, and my learning curve is so steep and I get to meet new people and interesting people all the time. Like, this would never get old.
Well, so what's coming up this spring? Is there an event that our listeners need to know about?
Many, many, many. So if you go to the SIG.org website, to all of our networking events, we have our event calendar out through 2023. So February, we have our CPO and Executive Roundtable. March, we're going to be doing a SIG University seminar get together. April, we have a one-day signature event. May, we have our Procurement Technology Conference. Oh, yeah, it just keeps on going. June, July, August, September, you name it. There's something every month.
That's great to hear. And I hope our audience takes a moment to check out sig.org. If you're not already interconnected and hooked up to that community, please check it out today. I've taken a peek many times. You've got some great resources on there.
Thank you. Yeah, I enjoy it. So it's going to be a great year. And I hope to meet everybody that's listening to the podcast in person at some point. And if nothing else, at least we can link up virtually in the meantime.
I hope that there's a time and place in this world where I get to come to a SIG event in person. I know that Anthony and I will be first in line.
Well, good. We're going to see you this fall, no matter what.
Okay, great. And it's going to be in Florida?
No, fall will be in La Costa, Carlsbad.
Okay, still, that's fine.
It's going to be gorgeous, and it'll be just an ocean. Yes.
Well, Dawn, it's been such a pleasure chatting with you and learning more about the sourcing hero from your point of view. Thanks for taking time with me today.
Thank you for your time. I enjoyed it.
All right. And I wish you all of the success in 2021 as you pivot time and time again.
Well, thank you. You just stay safe and healthy, and I look forward to seeing you in person.
All right. Thanks, Dawn.
All right. Have a great day.